Oh my God. Don't be afraid to take up space. Because nobody's going to know who you are, what you're about, what you're capable of if you don't show them that. Don't wait for anyone to discover you. Show up and show them. I love people who can be in the moment. I really admire that because I can't.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Walk to Wealth podcast. If you're tuning in on YouTube or any of the podcast directories, make sure to do yourself one teeny tiny little favor and make sure to give us a follow because I don't want you to miss out on any of the amazing guests I got coming out this year. Without further ado, if you guys are keeping up with the podcast, you know I had my little series of how I got into public speaking. And one of those, I told you guys a little bit about how I got on a TV show. I haven't really dropped too much info on it yet. But one of the amazing people I was able to meet on that show is my guest for today. And literally the same weekend I flew home, I ended up flying out to Miami. And the same week I flew home, I flew to Miami and I actually got to meet her. We had smoothies, was it, right? We had smoothies.
I'm still thinking about that smoothie.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie.
It was good, yeah. We had some
So
smoothies.
good.
And then we sat down and talked for like an hour and a half almost and chopped it up. And now we have her here on the podcast. So, Jill, for anyone who hasn't had the opportunity, who hasn't had the pleasure yet to get to know you, to get to meet you, tell us your elevator pitch. You know, who are you and what do you do?
Hi, I'm Jill Pavlov Vasquez, copywriter and comedian. I'm the owner of Your Creative Concierge. We're a psychology-based copywriting agency that focuses on getting your message clear and standing out.
Amazing, nice and simple. This is why copywriters make for great conversation. They're very, very precise with their wording, right? They know exactly what to say and say it in as least amount of words as possible, right?
Yeah,
Good copywriting 101.
It is something that is always top of mind. It's like because we all have short attention spans today. It happens even in conversation, you know? It's like, get to the point.
Yeah, no, 100%. My girlfriend gets mad at me all the time. She says I talk too much, but that's a story for another day.
Look, you need to cut yourself off right there. You're learning. It's all about self-awareness.
100%. But take us back in a time machine. What was little Jill like growing up? What was your childhood like? Were you always this entrepreneur, creative, comedic, person, or like how did that all like stir up?
Yeah, I probably was like singing before I could even talk. Like my dad grew up on Motown and the Beatles and Broadway too. And so ever since I was a little kid, I was just enthralled with music and the stage. And I was always getting involved in like whatever productions I could. I was always like wrangling in all my cousins and making shows for the whole family, writing, directing, and starring in them. So being that, creative little kid, I always had my nose in a book. And if I wasn't singing or dancing around, I was definitely writing or reading. So it's been a real natural transition to get into copywriting. I don't technically have any copywriting training. I've just always been a writer my whole life, a writer and a singer and a dancer and a creative minds.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I resonate with that. One story that I don't think I've shared on the podcast yet because it's just a random story. But I used to also sing as well. But then I had puberty, and then my voice dropped a little bit. I still have a higher pitched voice, but it's not like as high pitch as it used to be, so I can't hit the notes like I used to, So back in the day when I was still a squeaker, we like to say, when I still had the little squeaky. Yeah, I could hit all the notes, right? And I remember 5th grade year, we had for our 5th grade choir concert, whatever, chorus, we were actually sung the Beatles. So I know one of my favorite Beatles songs are, honestly, the only one I really remember is Eleanor Rigby. We used to sing Eleanor Rigby all the time like that. I still remember the chorus a little bit, but
my first cat, R.I.P., his name was Rigby after Eleanor Rigby. Yes.
Wow.
I am so much of a Beatles nerd that I actually went on a 2-week Beatles tour over in England with my dad.
Wow.
Back in 2016, and we saw the real Eleanor Rigby's grave.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is nuts.
Just dropped all my nerdiness right there.
Yeah, that's crazy. In a small world, because like for me, for the most part, like hearing like the Beatles, I mean, I was in 5th grade at the time, so like that Beatles obviously were way before my time or your time as well.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to single you out. I didn't want to single you out because I know the Beatles have been around for ages. It feels like. But long story short, for my story, for whatever reason, I remember I used to scratch my scalp. I don't know why. I don't know if I had like dry scalp or something, but like I used to scratch my scalp all the time. And then I had a little fro, so you couldn't really tell that I was losing hair. I didn't know either. And then I ended up getting a haircut, and I got a buzz cut. And so like you seen the bald spot in front, and so I ended up having to cancel. I was trying out to get a singing solo in the 5th grade concert, and I think I probably would have gotten it, but because I had the bald spot, I ended up not going to the tryouts, and so we'll never know where that story would have taken me. But I felt like I could have had a little mini career in music, a little bit. But to get back to the story a little bit, so you always creative, right? You always were singing, and as you got older, what was like your first taste of like entrepreneurship? Like, how did that come about? I know for me, I wasn't like entrepreneurial at all. I was very creative and I was very competitive, but like that kind of directed me into sports. I never thought of like, oh, let me sell something, let me start a business. So, like, what was it like for you?
Yeah, I feel kind of the same way. And it was, now there's this whole culture around entrepreneurship. It's very prevalent. Back when I was in college, the culture was around like Jersey Shore and binge drinking. So it was a very different world for me even back then. So something like entrepreneurship wasn't really even on my mind. Now, I can remember a time as a kid, because I also love fashion, where I actually, my mom sent me them like months ago because they're cleaning house, but I drew all these little designs and I put price tags on them, and I like sold them to my grandmom and my aunts. So that was maybe the first sign. But really, you talked briefly about the show that we met on, and that was really the first time that I really, really thought of myself as an entrepreneur, because I honestly like came into the show as oh, I'm a freelancer. That was my thought. Like, oh, I'm a freelancer. And I left the show being like, no, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm an empire and I'm a powerhouse and I can like build something.
Yeah. No, I love that you mentioned that. Because very similar to you, like my first job was like a counselor in training at Boys and Girls Club, and I was caddying, and then like slowly but surely I ended up like stumbling my way into business, and then like I had this whole identity shift that I had to kind of go through, where I knew for me personally that school was always like a scam, and I went anyways because I didn't know any other path.
Yeah.
And then once the pandemic happened, I had a very unique situation where like the entire world was on pause, and school was kind of awkward because we were at home now and no one really knew how to navigate Zoom classes. At least the professors didn't know how to really navigate them. So we would just wake up, open up or log in, and then go right back to bed. They can't force us to have our cameras on, so they don't know whether you're there or not.
Yeah.
And then we cheat on all the tests anyways because we're in the middle of a pandemic. You really expect me to be honorable right now and study for this? Like, no.
We don't even know if we're gonna live past tomorrow, sir.
Exactly. And they want me to study for an exam. But yeah, so for me, I ended up how I got into like entrepreneurship was actually I paid for like a $500 course on real estate wholesaling. I ended up not working out. Some attorney gave me some bad information that actually was completely false. There was some truth to it. But long story short, he was wrong. And then I ended up getting into real estate as an agent, and that kind of sparked everything for me. And from there, like my whole trajectory kind of shifted. Was there like a point like that for you in your life where you're like, all right, this Jersey Shore lifestyle, it's cool and all. Did you ever work corporate at all, or did you kind of just go straight into like freelance?
Yeah.
Like, where did you go?
I was in the corporate world right before I launched Your Creative Concierge. It's the reason that I launched it. It was what I consider to be my formal copywriting training, because it was my first time that I had a formal copyright. I'd always been in marketing, but it was the first time I had a title of copywriter. So I was in the corporate world for 3 years before, and I've been in other positions throughout my 20s and 30s in the corporate world, but the most significant one was right before I went out on my own.
Yeah. Okay. And for anyone that, we're marketers, so this is like kind of like, we're just talking right now, but for anyone who doesn't know what copywriting is, it's one of those things that like kind of just gets swept under the rug. No one really talks about what copywriting is. It's a word like, unless you are a marketer, you may not even you may have never even heard that word in conversation. So what is copywriting, and like kind of like why is it important?
Yeah. I always start with what it's not first, because I do take for granted that everyone in marketing knows what copywriting is, but people outside that world might think that it has something to do with trademarks or patents, which I get a lot. I actually thought that that's what it was if you had asked me like 10 years ago. But it has nothing to do with that. It's copywriting, writing. So in its most basic form, it's all your written marketing content, your blogs, your email marketing, your landing pages, the wording on it. And that's kind of like the layman's version of it. Really, what's underneath copywriting and the point of it is to use your words so persuasively that your audience is drawn to take the action that you want them to take. So it's not just about putting words on a page. It's actively, and in Your Creative Concierge, we actively use psychology in order to think, how do we get our target audience to do what we want them to do?
Yeah, that's amazing. For me, like, that's a very well put. For me, so like how I learned about copywriting is, all right, this is last year around this time, actually. Maybe May-ish. We're pretty much already almost in May. So last year around this time,
it's pretty much like 2025 already. Let's be honest.
Yeah, at this point, right? This year is over, right? At the speed that it's moving, and so I ended up I was doing my first big launch. It was a 4-day AI workshop that I was doing, and I wanted to create a sales page for it so that on day 4, so day 1, 2, and 3, the game plan was I was going to teach for free. Day 4, I was going to pitch everybody. There's no teaching day 4. It's time to to take home all the marble. I'm coming in to hunt and catch as many new students into my program as possible. I did all the teaching I needed to do on day 1, 2, and 3. Gave all the free value up front. Now it's time to reap from the harvest. And so that was the game plan, right? And so I ended up. I didn't know how to write a sales page, and so the first thing I do when I need to do something in business is I watch as many YouTube videos as possible and figure out, all right, can I do this on my own? And I found this one lady. I don't know if you know her. Her name is Alex Catoni. Her business is called like Copy Posse.
No, I haven't heard of her.
But she has like a couple 100,000 subscribers on YouTube. And so when I typed in copywriting, I found her. And so I started watching a couple of her videos and I ended up buying one of her courses. I think it was like $200. I was like, $200, no problem, easy. Because my courses at that time was 1,000. I sell one person, and that's like a 5x return. I'm like, all right, paid the little $200, went through the course, and it teaches you how to write a sales page. And like that's when I started to really start taking copywriting a little more serious. I figured like I realized that there's an art to and a science, of course. There's a both. It's a mix. It's an art and a science to getting people to buy digitally. When you're not in front of them, you can't talk to them, right? It's very, very different trying to buy someone off of them reading something than it is like me and you right now talking, or me and you talking in person. Like that's a whole different ball game. It's like, how do you get someone to buy when there is no person-to-person interaction in there? It's literally them, their laptop, and whatever words they got on that page, and that's pretty much it. And so that's kind of where like I kind of like started to realize the importance of like copywriting and all that stuff. So for you, like, what was that?
I was just gonna say, on top of that, you only have 3 seconds to grab their attention too. On top of all that you just mentioned.
Yeah, no, 100%. That's why, and we probably like nerd out a little bit for people who are listening that aren't in business yet. Like copywriting applies for everything. That applies for the emails you write. That applies for like the captions you write on your posts. Like you can, for at least the way I understand copywriting to be, like any written, and even if your videos, right? If you script out your videos as well, that's technically copy. I think copywriting and it's just your messaging, whether that's what you're saying verbally, what you're writing down on paper, whether that's a newsletter, a blog. Like I think of all of it as copywriting. And so it's like one of the people I look up to. I don't know if you know him. His name is, he's actually a psychology guy. He had nothing to do with copywriting or business really at all. His name is Jordan Peterson.
Oh yeah, and of course.
He's probably like the most articulate person I've ever seen on the planet. So like I could only imagine if like he became a copywriter, like, because he already has a very, very deep understanding on like clinical psychology and how
Yeah.
people work. And so it's like, man, it's been fun learning how to write and why I write. I remember the other day someone reached out to me like, John, why are your emails so always grammatically incorrect? And I was like, listen, there's a method to the madness, right?
Yeah.
There is a method to the madness. So for anyone that like doesn't really understand why it matters, like why should someone learn how to write? And what's the difference between writing for like academia and writing for your business to sell something?
So how would someone learn how to write? I think the first thing that I would do is, you know, try to think where to even start. I would maybe start with your competitors, and start just kind of going out there and seeing like what other people are talking about and how they're talking about it. Definitely, if you're like starting with no writing skills, just like you did, John, I would invest in a class. I mean, that course sounds like really great value. So we know that they exist out there, because there's just a lot of basics when it comes to structure and framework that you need to know before you can really dive into it. Like, there's almost like a story map that you have to lead your customers
Mm.
through. So I would say like training and then also studying your competitors are two great places to start if you've never really taken on copywriting before.
Yeah. No, you mentioned something about story. Um, there's something I cover in my presentations usually when I teach about like how facts tell, stories tell. And then I don't know, you probably know Russell Brunson, ClickFunnels, all that stuff. The book I recommended you, Expert Secrets. There we go. That book in there, he talks about the Epiphany Bridge framework, and like that's a whole storytelling framework. And for anyone that doesn't know Russell Brunson, um, if you're into books or just into business, either or, I would highly recommend that book. That's one of my favorite books. But in there, he talks about like a way to tell stories, and like what I do now with my podcast, most people don't ever realize. And but how the way I set up the podcast interview is like I usually ask, hey, tell us your elevator pitch, right? Just so like people know your name, whatever. But then after that, I say, take us back in a time machine. And depending on some people, like they'll like get really deep into their story. Some people kind of just breeze by it. But either way, it gives me a starting point as to, all right, here's where the story begins. Let me help them develop their character. Because if you ask us, most people, if you ask them like, "Oh, tell us a story," they're not gonna answer in a story more often than not, unless they're like a public speaker person or something like that. Then they might. It's
Yeah.
like while I'm doing that in the back of my head, I'm like, all right, how do I steer this conversation in a way that gets them to tell their story about how they got to where they're at and what they do, without me asking straight up like, hey, tell us your life story, because I feel like that's kind of like the easy way out. Plus it also gives me some like room
Mm-hmm.
to take to go on tangents and stuff like that when I'm talking to people.
Yeah. And it probably also gives like a sense of connection too, because maybe someone mentioned something beyond what they do in business as well. And that's really like the basis of copywriting is connecting with people, because people buy from people that they trust, people buy from people that they feel connected to. People don't buy from chat gpt, they don't buy from words, that they don't buy from robots, they buy from words that they feel connected to, that words that like call to them.
Yeah. Let me ask you, to tie the story back a little bit. So you ended up leaving your main gig at the time to start your creative concierge. Take us like bring us into that time period in your life. What was that like, making it quick, pulling the plug or releasing yourself from the golden handcuffs, they say, right? What was that like, and going into your business, and what were the people around you kind of saying? Because I feel like sometimes like getting into business after going corporate, the people around you tend to look at you like you have three heads or something. Because like, why would you give up the stability and all this for some idea? It's like, did you have that experience? Like, what was that like around that time period?
It was kind of crazy because I had gotten really used to working from home from the pandemic for my corporate job. I think my
Mhm.
first year there, I was in office, and then my second year was working from home. And then I was really sour when they made us come back to the office. I was like, this sucks, because I was just someone who I work very quickly, very efficiently. I'm not someone who needs as much time to get the job done as the average person. So a lot of the time when I was in the office, I found myself with free time. When that was time at home, I would get stuff done at home. And essentially, they started tracking my laptop. And even though I got all my work done, even though my managers, my direct managers, were very happy with me, even though I always asked if any of my teammates needed any help, like I was always making sure, um, you know, they were just kind of going by those numbers. And I get it from their side, I do. But from my side, I'm just like, to get a 3% raise every year and like devote all my time to this company, and I'm getting the job done, but I'm not having my butt in the seat for this many hours. It just didn't make sense to me anymore. Like, it just all
Yeah.
seemed so stupid. So, and I'm writing about travel. I'm sitting in a cubicle. I'm like, and every day I'm watching. At the time I was like obsessed with Little Mix, and I'm watching their videos. I'm like, oh, I could have been a star, and here I am in this cubicle.
Yeah.
So, and I'm still not a pop star, spoiler alert, in case you were wondering. But yeah, no. So there was this mounting tension with me and the owner of the company because of this laptop tracking, and my managers were fighting hard for me because they loved me and loved the work that I did, and they were like, "We don't care. She gets the job done." And I can feel this mounting tension. And at that point, I had one freelance client already, and I was talking to another freelance client, and she's a business owner as well, and she just kind of was like really giving me the confidence to walk away. And she's like, I have all these resources, like I can help you get started with your LLC, blah blah blah. And the more we talked about it together, like I would literally go on my lunch break and like walk around on the cell phone and talk to her and be like, yeah, I think this sounds like a good idea. So one day, after my bosses called me in for a meeting because the owner was like upset with me, I was just like, you know what, that's it. And I came in the next day with my resignation letter, and I was like, I'm out. I'm not dealing with this anymore. And people were like upset to see me leave, but I don't think anyone like didn't understand. Like, they knew I was like a butterfly whose wings have been like scissored off and needed to regrow and just get out of there
Yeah.
and fly. So I did that.
No, that makes perfect sense because it was kind of similar. Well, not so much in the sense where like because I worked at a restaurant, so like you're pretty much you were just moving around all day long, regardless like of whether there's 3 people in the restaurant or 100 people in the restaurant at the same time that walk in. But for me, it was kind of similar where when I did put my 2 weeks in, and I didn't leave on bad terms at all, but the people, like the manager, whatever, they kind of knew it was coming.
Yeah.
Cause like there was days I'll come into the restaurant and like I'll bring in my laptop, and then when it gets slow, instead of like clean up or I feel like people find stuff to do, and it's like they'll just, oh look, John, like look at these forks, they're not all yeah. I'm like
wasting my damn time.
I was like, the forks look fine, they're good enough, right? They're like, and so I'll bring my laptop sometimes, and so for a while they kind of knew that they knew what I was licensed in real estate for a while. They knew what I was doing some entrepreneurial things here and there, and it was just only a matter of time. And but when that time did come, like honestly, it was a little bittersweet. It was weird because like at that same time, when I did put my 2 weeks in, my course launch went really really well. So I had the money just made that day alone, like enough saved to keep me good for a while. And so it's like, but even still, it just like a part of me was like wanted to cling on because like I knew like after that, it's like there's no other job. Like it's now do or die, sink or
Yeah.
swim. This is it. And so, but it definitely was a good feeling because part of me as well knew that I felt like I was being caged in almost in a way, and like it wasn't an environment for me to like really go. I was food runner. If I mean, I wanted to like get promoted, I can become a server,
Yeah.
but I'm still in the restaurant, right? And so
Yeah.
for me, I ended up pulling the plug, and then from there, I started getting shiny object syndrome, and then I kind of got distracted, lost all momentum, and had to building it back up. But like, yeah, when you're on your own, like it's been hard. One, this
Yeah.
year I feel like has been the hardest year because this has been my first year like completely independent, no job or anything like that. But like two, it's also been like very very eye opening. Like I've been learning a lot about myself, especially too. Now
Yeah.
that I've been in it, so like once you ended up making that quit, right? So you already had a client, you had someone that was helping you out. What was the time after following? Because for me, I was on cloud nine. I went from all right, course launch just went well. All right, let me start an agency. Right, that's gonna be my high ticket offer. Right, I was gonna have my course as my mid ticket offer, agency, and that's a whole different business model than like a course business. And it's like that kind of like just like completely derailed me. So like, what was it like for you after you ended up pulling the plug on your job and like start focusing more on your business?
Yeah, I decided to go like the cheap bonanza route where I don't know why I landed on biographies. I guess because they make sense to people. Everyone might not think that they need a blog, but when you think
Yeah,
about it, everyone needs a biography. Everyone in business, most people have a LinkedIn, something like that. So I'm like, all right, let me try to reel people in by doing like a biography sale. So I was selling these $99 biographies. Mind you, this is before ChatGPT existed. And
yeah,
quick sidebar, I say like people don't respond to ChatGPT. Like I will shit on ChatGPT all day essentially, and when I'm doing that, I'm talking about stuff that comes straight from ChatGPT that has not been manipulated by a human at all. But if I said that I don't use ChatGPT, then I would be a liar, because it does help me with framework. It does help me with transcription and summary and stuff like that. All these little hacks that I've learned to kind of help save me time with researching and stuff like that. That's very different than just putting out stuff that doesn't sound human. So I just
yeah.
want to preface that. But anyway, when I was doing these biographies, ChatGPT did not exist. So I had literally no help. It was just me. And I also didn't have as much copywriting training in that sect as I thought. And I basically wrote and like 2-page long editorials for these people who were paying me $99, like by hand. They would take me like 2 to 3 days to write for like
Sheesh.
$99. And then I never even got, because I didn't have the right tools to follow up, and I don't know what I expected, but nothing really ever even came from them. I didn't get any regular business. So that was kind of my rocky start,
It's
I
not.
would say.
Sheesh. All right. All right. So we kind of had like kind of similar where we did something and it didn't work out
Mm-hmm.
as well as we thought. And it happened to me for a lot in business. It's like we have an idea and it just doesn't work out the way I wanted to pivot a little bit too. Because I know you also said you're a comedian.
Yes.
When did comedy come into the mix? Because you hasn't mentioned it so far yet. So were you doing that all throughout the time? Was this like kind of like your outlet, your escape, while you were figuring out the business, or like where did that all come into the mix?
Yeah, I mean, again, definitely I place it back to my childhood, because I was doing making my own videos at home and
Mm,
doing sketch comedy, and I'm gonna date myself here, but like In Living Color and Mad TV, I was watching those every weekend, and like I knew back then that's what I wanted to do. Like
yeah.
all that, I wanted to be on that show so badly. I was so jealous of everyone who was on that show. So, I was a theater kid in high school. I majored in theater in college, and that was my first ever comedy group that I got involved in. I was in a sketch comedy group called the Acropolis in
Okay.
college, and then I was in a sketch comedy group when I was like 21, 22 in Philly called Comic Energy. So I was always like in different sketch groups and doing improv and stuff like that. But stand up, that was a more recent journey, because that seemed like the scariest of them all to me.
Yeah.
That's stand up. Most people don't realize it, but you're really bearing your soul for people to laugh at. especially when you're someone like me who more prefers the self-deprecating comedy rather than making fun of other people. I prefer to make fun of myself. And that gets it gets a lot vulnerable, actually. So that kind of always scared me, also because it's an alone activity. I love being in sketch comedy because I love having someone to work off of and build. When you're out there alone, it's very scary, but it actually did come at almost the exact same time as starting my own business, because I had time. I had that headspace for it again. Like, I had the time, I had the freedom. So I took my first stand-up lesson maybe a month and a half after I started the business. And I've been taking stand-up and practicing at open mics ever since. I still don't feel like I'm great at it, but I'm good at it.
Stand-up's one of those things where it's like, when you're great, you'll know. When you're not, you'll
It's
know.
just, it doesn't feel as comfortable and as natural as improv. And you can't hide. You know, what I love about sketch and improv is that I can play a character. So who people are seeing isn't necessarily me.
Yeah.
It's, like I said, it's a lot scarier to get up there as yourself.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I started getting a little bit into comedy as I started getting more invested into public speaking. I haven't taken any comedy myself, but I've watched comedians,
Mm-hmm.
and it's you understand it from like being like getting training as a public speaker. You appreciate the art of stand-up so much more.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if a guy is funny, like before I used to think, oh yeah, he's funny, like, and that's it. That was the end of it. But there's so much that goes into like stage presence and the pauses and the illustration with your body language, right? Not just painting a picture,
Mm-hmm.
but like
And the
also
joke
like
structure.
yeah. And I realized like there's a lot of different types of funny.
Yeah.
Like, there's like some people who are like more like, they have a good, setup and a punchline, and they'll make you laugh. There's people who are good with like jokes. There's people who are good at, at just like frying people, like
Crowd
get
work.
just getting someone in the stands and just roasting them and off the top. And then there's some people who are more like goofy. So like the joke itself isn't the funniest, but because they're just so goofy as a person and like their personality, it makes it that much more funny. And then there's some people who are like just like kind of all in one, just like super comedians, right? They're funny, they have actual jokes that are good, but then they're also goofy, which makes the jokes that much better. And then they also have stage presence and they're well spoken. They don't say they never have any filler words as well. Like, you start watching some of these better comedians, and like they're really, really good at communicating. And to kind of tie that back to what we've been talking about today, like, copywriting is, in a nutshell, just communication, right?
Yeah.
You're communicating. And so it's like, how has comedy, if it has, played a role in your copywriting? Because like that's a whole different art form, like making people laugh versus trying to get someone to buy your product, your service, or get your lead magnet or whatever. Like, how are those two worlds kind of, do they coincide a little bit? Do you get inspiration
Oh my
from
God,
the
they
other?
coincide so much. And I think it really all comes back down to psychology. You know, how do I make people laugh? How do I make people buy? It's really, for all of it, you have to get inside their heads, your audience's head, your customer's head. It's really about seeing what people want, what people are interested in, what people relate to is a huge one, because if comedy's not relatable, no one's going to laugh. I can't get up there and talk about like I don't know. I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but it has to be relatable. Otherwise, people don't connect to it. And same thing with your target audience as with a comedic audience. Not every audience is going to be for you. You know, not everyone loves Matt Rife. Some people love him, some people hate him, but he panders to his target audience. And that's what businesses need to do. Instead of trying to get all the likes or all the followers, it's the ones that are going to be your fans that are the important ones.
You know that guy, Joey, I think his name Joey Barbosa, Spanish guy, like slimmer, 5'8", look like he's high often.
I don't know of him.
That's one of the guys that I've been able to see. And like his whole skit was like, from the beginning to the end, was like hilarious. I went to go see him in New York, I think a couple months ago this year, in January, I think it was, and like, he was really really good. And what's one thing I eventually want to dabble with, like improv and stand up, just because like knowing how to communicate goes so far. And a lot of people think that, oh, like, oh, I'm not in business, it doesn't matter. But like, you're talking to people all the time. So whether you're just at the bar chopping it up with the boys, like if you know how to tell a good story, guess who's everyone's gonna listen to?
Yeah.
You, right?
Yeah.
And then no, now let's say you have a business. Now you're at a networking event, right? Even better. Now let's say you're doing a presentation, and so it's like communication is one of those skills. Like, I think Warren Buffett said that's the easiest way to increase your company value by 50% is to like become a good communicator, something like that along those lines. And so to kind of come back to where we're at. So you got into to stand up around the same time that you kind of started your business. And so like now, how do you manage both growing your business? You said you also, before we hopped on and press record, you said you're about to hire your first employee. So like manage growing your business with some of the things that you just genuinely love to do, that you've always loved to do. Because I feel like a lot of times, especially when you're trying to get it off the ground and you start growing, like you get into that tunnel vision mode where you don't see anything, and slowly but surely you start to lose touch with all the things you once loved, kind of type of thing. So it's like,
Mm.
how do you stay you while also growing the business? How do you make the time for both?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm about to learn that the answer to that is delegation, because I find it really hard to write comedy, because I'm writing all day. So it's my passion is also my career. It's writing, writing, writing. It intertwines. And so when I want to take a break, I can't really turn to my hobby or passion
Mm.
because it's some of the same brain.
Yeah.
So that's why I am really excited to be hiring my first employee for Your Creative Concierge to take some of the day-to-day writing off of my plate so that I can bring myself back to the fun of comedy, because I actually have taken the whole year off of comedy. January, February, March, I was so ingrained in my business that I just didn't have the brain for it. And I'm not someone who's going to go on stage or post a video if it's not my A plus work. I'm not going to put crap. I'd rather put nothing out into the world than crap. So I'm literally about to do my first show back on stage tomorrow night. Not that I'm like
No
nervous
pressure.
or anything.
No
Oh
pressure.
my God. It's a muscle too. And I study with the Second City in Chicago. I study with them. I have studied with them in person, currently study with them virtually. And I just got back in the sketch writing class with them. I had my first class in writing 2 last night. So I was saying it's like a muscle. And when you don't work it, you really do lose it. So it feels good to kind of be working out that muscle and getting my funny back a little
No,
bit. But it is not easy to manage both.
no, and that's something that I've kind of lost touch with as well. Like just this past, I think for the longest time, I've been so inconsistent with the gym.
Mm.
Like just combine. I mean, I still eat pretty healthy, so that I'm still like, I haven't gained any weight. Actually, I lost weight because I lost muscle, but you know, um, I've been completely inconsistent with the gym. I started like hooping again past couple weeks. I'm like, damn, I need to get back in it. Like, because me being at least used to being an athlete, it's like being in shape is something like I take pride in, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
now I'm getting back to playing ball again. It's like, dang, I'm tired. We just got one game in. Like, this is unacceptable. Like, I got to get back to how I was watching a video of me working out like a couple years ago, and like I was throwing around weight, and I'm like, damn, like all those weights feel heavy now. I can't do none of those. I can't lift any of those weights anymore. I can't even lift half of those weights anymore. It's like, no, I need to stop slacking and get back to where I once was, and so I don't lose it. And I one thing I have been doing well, I always love anime. So like I've been watching a lot of anime this year. I stopped for a very, very long time. And then like last year I started picking back up. It's just like it's hard kind of doing both. Because you can almost feel guilty, because especially when your business is still getting off the ground. It's
Yeah.
like, well, I haven't accomplished anything yet. I don't have the right to like do anything but the business. So sometimes you kind of feel guilty for even wanting to do anything aside of growing at the business. But you have to kind of have the best of both worlds, because if you don't show up for
No one
yourself, you're
else
not
will.
gonna. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so that, Joe, I feel like I could talk to you like forever.
I
And we
know.
definitely got to stay in touch
We have
because
so
time,
much in common.
100%. And like, we're already like time, this conversation has just been flying.
Yeah.
So like, where can we connect with you? Where can we find you at? So that if anyone in our audience wants to keep up with you, wants to connect with you, needs your services, like, where do we go?
Yeah, I'll just send you guys to Instagram. My comedy one is at Comedy Jill. And if you want to follow me for copywriting, a little less exciting, but still helpful. It's at Your Creative Concierge.
And
And
I
no,
was gonna
that's
say,
it.
for anyone that doesn't think it's exciting, wait till you make some money from it, and then it's like,
Yeah,
and not,
exactly.
and I'm not even saying like make some money as becoming like a copywriter. I'm
Yeah.
talking about like you write like for your first sales page, and someone reads it and buys, and then it's like,
Yes.
ah,
Oh yeah.
copywriting is fun, and so it is very exciting. It takes a little bit to get it. It's an acquired taste. But
Yeah,
it's
for
very easy to acquire it when there's money coming in.
sure.
So Joe, now it's time for our famous five. I'm super excited to hear what you got to say. Question number one is, what is the most impactful lesson you've learned in life?
Whew. Oh my God. Don't be afraid to take up space. Because nobody's going to know who you are, what you're about, what you're capable of if you don't show them that. Don't wait for anyone to discover you. Show up and show them.
What is the most admirable trait a person can have?
Admirable trait. Wow. I love people who can be in the moment. I really admire that because I can't. And I think that people who can do that really are lucky, I guess.
100%. It's hard being a podcaster and being in the moment because I'm trying to have a great conversation with
And then
you,
you're like,
but then
what's next? Yeah.
not even just that, but I'm also like, we're on a time constraint. I want to be respectful of your time as well, and like, yeah, it's hard sometimes because you get into a conversation and like time just goes out the window.
I know.
So yeah, no, I definitely 100%. If you had to change someone's life but only had one book, which book would you recommend?
Beauty Sick. I can't remember the author's name right now, but it's basically just about how we've been conditioned to, especially as women, to be beautiful more than anything else, and how it's made our culture very sick. And as someone who has been an eating disorder survivor, which is a whole other conversation, I think that this book would impact any woman's life.
What is the legacy that you're working on leaving behind?
I just want to, my goal is to give someone an escape through laughter. Like all the times that I've looked to people to escape through laughter. I hate seeing people in real life cry or be upset. Like I just want to make people smile. So I want to give them a place to escape to if they need it.
And for anyone that wants to embark on their walk to wealth today, what is the first step you recommend they take?
I'm trying to think of exactly how Mark Cuban says it, but it is, don't live beyond your means. Just don't live beyond your means. A lot of us are guilty of it. I live in Miami. I look around, everyone's guilty of it. But really when I stopped, when I focused on what was important to put my money towards, that's really when I got focused in my business and walk to wealth, I would say.
Amazing. Joe, that's all for our conversation today. Thanks again for hopping on, and we're definitely gonna have to do another one of these because this time went by too fast. we have to get you back on.
Thank you. I would love to. We'll do a whole part 2.